Religion, long the spiritual nourishment of the soul, now groundbreaking research on how it impacts the brain.
Because it's the biggest question out there.
Scientists analyzing the minds of believers.
Can you tell the difference between the brain of Mother Teresa versus a terrorist?
Measuring the divine one brain scan at a time.
This is TechKnow, a show about innovations that can change lives.
The science of fighting a wildfire.
We're going to explore the intersection of hardware and humanity, and we're doing it in a unique way. This is a show about science by scientists. And now TechKnow investigates religion and the brain. Hey, welcome to TechKnow. I'm Phil Torres here with Dr. Crystal Dilworth and Cara Santa Maria. Now, today we're going to start out talking about science and religion. Now, to be blunt, these aren't two things that often see eye to eye.
True. I mean, on the surface, they very much seem opposed to each other. I mean, I was a scientist, trained, take nothing on faith, and only look at the data.
And that's what's so cool about this study. You know, Crystal and I had a chance to go to the University of Utah, where researchers are trying to determine whether feeling the spirit can be measured scientifically.
We even got a chance to participate in the study, and the results were interesting. Let's take a look.
I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Religious faith. Of the 7 billion people on the planet, it's estimated that 84% are members of one of hundreds of religions. Despite the different gods, philosophies, and rituals, most religions share a promise for a physical sense of spirituality.
In our faith, we do believe that you have the Spirit constantly with you.
Like 27-year-old Auriel Peterson, I was raised Mormon, a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, LDS for short, a Christian faith founded in the United States in 1830.
For people who maybe have never felt the spirit, can you, I know it's very personal, but can you try to describe maybe some of the components of it?
It's a very much peaceful feeling. I have clarity and I have a burning sensation throughout my chest.
And do you get overwhelmed with any sort of emotional response?
It does. It elicits a lot of emotion, and I'm prone to crying. And so I get a little teary and a little misty-eyed.
Auriel, a third-generation Mormon studying to be a nurse, lives near Salt Lake City, Utah, headquarters of the Mormon Church, where she served her 18-month mission.
It's a concentrated time in your life where you have many spiritual experiences.
Do you believe in your heart of hearts that you can scientifically investigate something like faith?
I'd like to think so. I welcome anything that embraces the fact that you have a physical reaction to that, and that can be looked upon and measured.
Auriel's devotion to God and science made her a perfect subject for the University of Utah's Religious Brain Project. That's where TechKnow's Dr. Crystal Dilworth picks up this story.
What motivated you to ask questions about religion and neuroscience?
Because it's the biggest question out there.
Dr. Jeffrey Anderson, professor of radiology and bioengineering, teamed up with Dr. Julie Korenberg, director of the Center for Integrated Neuroscience and Human Behavior. The study combined brain scans and blood tests on 20 devout Mormons to track their neurological reactions to biologically explain spiritual sensations.
What we don't even know when a young boy goes off to join ISIS or a Mormon in Salt Lake has some sense of connectedness with the divine in their view. We don't know if that's the same thing. What do people experience in their brains when they feel religious and spiritual experience?
What we've been awaiting is the level of genetic analysis and the level of imaging analysis to be able to get to this critical intersection point.
Happy believers.
For now, we're just going to put this in here. This is like a big thing.
Participants, like Auriel, first undergo a structural MRI that gives a detailed picture of the brain at rest. Next is a functional MRI that records Auriel's brain activity while she's reading quotes about faith that are paired with photos of religious figures. Next up, church videos depicting Mormon culture. During each, Auriel has to press a button to indicate, quote, how strongly are you feeling the spirit? And, quote, how spiritually meaningful is this? Before and after the scans, blood was drawn.
What molecules are you looking to preserve?
One of them is called oxytocin, and the other one, vasopressin. They are also involved in reproduction. So it makes sense that the same hormones or molecules that are causing you to have romance are also influencing how you feel good, and perhaps are giving us some hints as to similarities between religious experiences and other stimulations of euphoria.
Since Kara and I have both studied the brain, we asked to get a chance to experience the study firsthand.
Are you apprehensive about seeing like Mormon imagery again since you're a former Mormon?
No, not apprehensive, but I am interested to see if I do have activity in the brain, because I think I'll have probably some positive memories, even though now I don't even believe in God. I mean, I'm an atheist.
Right, I guess we'll find out.
But you weren't raised religious at all, right?
Not really, no.
So I'm wondering if any of the imagery that you see is gonna resonate with you at all.
I don't think I'll have anything to connect it to.
Hello.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you, Dr. Anderson.
Understand you're ready to have your brain scanned?
Yes, yeah.
So.
Great.
But before we do, I probably can't go in there with all this metal, can I?
Not a good idea.
Okay, so I need to
Hurts
take
the
all this
image
off?
quality. Yes,
Everything
please.
in my face and my hands?
Preferably.
Okay.
You've got a lot more to do than I do.
The MRI scanner is one powerful magnet, and here's what could happen to any metal.
Whoa!
So Kara, minus her bling,
Ta-da. Ready to go.
is ready to have her mind read. While I watch in the control room with Dr. Anderson.
Can you explain a little bit about how an fMRI gets its signals?
That helmet that she has coils of wire that pick up the radio waves from the scanner. The MRI signal is sensitive to blood oxygen, and the blood oxygen lets us know how much blood flow there is in different parts of the brain, and that lets us know indirectly what the brain is doing.
When certain parts of the brain are activated, more or less blood is flowing to those areas?
That's right, and it's very precise. Even within a few millimeters, we'll take an image through the entire brain, and then the next 700 milliseconds, we take another image all the way through the brain. So we can see changes over time.
I would imagine that feeling the spirit as you describe it is very subjective.
I don't buy that. I think there's more common ground than people suppose. Okay, the next scan that we're going to do is some quotations.
Like Auriel, Kara is instructed to press a button to indicate any spiritual reaction.
Okay, we're done.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
She can be released.
Yeah.
How was your experience?
I would say the hardest thing is that you have to stay completely still. And we drank a lot of coffee this morning.
We did. So tell me if my brain looks weird.
Okay, I will.
Now I get to watch Crystal's brain and debrief Dr. Anderson about my experience.
I wondered if looking at memory systems, if certain things would be, light up more for me because I had a physical memory of being there, of having that experience.
For the next 6 minutes, you'll see audiovisual images, and we want you to push a button if you feel any peak emotional response.
If I had taken this when I was
Yeah.
8 years old, it might have been different.
And in conversations with people who aren't believers, that's such a common sentiment that would I feel the same thing if I were in nature, if I had the ability to listen to music? We wonder, are they the same brain networks? And yet the participants in the study had a very different experience to the same stimuli. They
I'm sure.
almost across the board would come out in tears.
But no tears from Crystal when she was done.
How was it?
I thought it would be more unpleasant or uncomfortable, but it wasn't that bad.
Did you feel the spirit?
I hope they can see some kind of emotional response.
We probably both had one, they just might be different.
A computer program sifts through the images of our cortical folds, those grooves and bumps that make up our brain, measuring our reactions.
When we come back, we'll see the results of our fMRI scans.
And find out which one of us has more cortical folds.
Researchers Julie Korenberg and Jeffrey Anderson are conducting brain scans and blood tests on a small group of devout Mormons. Tracking reactions to religious quotes and videos to find a biological connection to the feeling of spiritual bliss.
Now you get to look like an astronaut.
TechKnow's resident neuroscientist, Dr. Crystal Dilworth, and I asked to get our heads examined.
Okay, the next scan that we're going to do is some quotations.
For me, the project had added resonance.
I'm here at Temple Square in Salt Lake City, Utah. I used to come here all the time as a child because I was raised Mormon until I was 14 years old. And I'm interested to see how that upbringing may affect my brain scans.
It took about 2 hours to do an analysis of our scans.
Both Kara and Crystal have perfectly beautiful brains.
Beautiful, but what does it really mean?
Are you apprehensive?
It was time to compare my brain and Crystal's against Auriel Peterson's.
This is Auriel's response. You're looking at here are pictures of the brain when she was looking at those same quotations that both of you looked at.
What regions of the brain seem to be most involved for her?
There's an area in the middle of the brain that we call the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, and the area called the insula, and together form a special brain network that's called the novelty detection network, or salience network.
The salience network is part of the circuitry in the brain that decides what's most important and what's worth responding to.
Why would you see more activity in novelty areas when she would have been exposed to these types of quotes and imagery before?
I'm not sure if it's so much that it's new or novel as much as it's more relevant to her. And it may be that that network is responding to her feelings.
It may be activating some of those regions that say, wow, this is something I want to focus on.
And what did Auriel think about that?
Your brain was lit up like a Christmas tree. Wow. It was very telling how much the emotional response on your brain showed a lot of activity in a lot of different regions.
I welcome anything that embraces the fact that you have a physical reaction to that and that can be looked upon and measured.
And then it was time to find out how we did.
Something tells me there will be some differences in our brain.
I think so. You were scanned first, so you get to go first on this too.
So what do you notice?
It's very quiet. My brain is very quiet.
And there's a few areas that seem pretty significant, even if they are small. And they tend to be in what we call the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And it has to do with analysis, pattern recognition, working memory, being able to determine what a complex idea represents. So you're thinking harder about those ones that you like more.
So this is the brain of somebody who is having the opposite of an emotional response.
This is the brain on analysis.
Well, that sounds like me. That looks like Crystal.
That's me.
I recognize you by your brain. You have more activity in
some
certain
different
areas.
region.
Even though that there's some brain activity that's different here, what we do see is, again, we see dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, same as for Kara. And then we also see an area in the intraparietal sulcus.
Yeah, so that's one we haven't mentioned before. What does it do?
Attention.
Oh. So you knew you were going to scan our brains today, and you knew about our backgrounds beforehand.
Yes.
Do our scans meet your expectations?
Yes. I think that's pretty much what we would have expected, that there would be very little activity for these types of stimuli. And where there is activity, it's much more analytical, cerebral.
The researchers hope to widen the study to a variety of religions.
Would the results of your study contribute to being able to tell the difference between the brain of Mother Teresa versus a terrorist?
I think perhaps more likely we may see that there is no difference.
We might see that they're very similar.
And when we understand that, perhaps it's possible to recognize that our brains work the same way, our feelings are the same, regardless of what doctrines they're associated with. And I think that's provable.
Well, that was a really fascinating look into one aspect of how the brain works, but you guys both have a background in neuroscience. What was your take?
I think it's really important to put a study like this in context. I mean, one study only on devout Mormons, what you can really interpret from the results is that this is preliminary. I mean, these can be very exciting, but we need larger studies with more test subjects and different religions and control groups in order to really say conclusively that we know anything about faith in the brain.
You know, and why do you think there aren't more studies like this?
It's really a fledgling field. You know, only recently do we have the tools to deeply investigate the brain, and researchers are now interested. What is happening when somebody's having a religious experience? But it is hard to get funding. You know, this is not a field of research that would necessarily improve somebody's health or their longevity.
For me watching this, I'm religious myself, but I'm also a scientist. And I really appreciate studies like this because it allows this type of conversation to happen. It kind of breaks down some of those walls. And at the end of the day, for me personally, my religion is more than just that feeling. You know, it's kind of a way of life, but I do think that feeling is something special and something I would love to learn more about.
From my experience growing up in the Mormon church, I realized that a lot of, you know, LDS individuals are very pro-science, and they're interested in a marriage between science and faith.
Now, from neuroscience, your area of expertise, to entomology, my area of science, we're gonna go discover some new species of insects. We don't even need a passport or a plane ticket to do it.
Now, this next story has something that I think we all love about science.
Bugs.
Well, the story is about discovery. It's about getting people interested in and excited about science. And for Phil, it's about bugs.
Absolutely, but it's also a reminder that there is discovery in science all around us. You just have to take the time to look. It's not your typical entomologist field route, but a car, congestion, and a trunk full of dead bugs are essential tools of the trade for Lisa Gonzalez. It's Los Angeles, California. Hidden in between the freeways, beaches, and palm trees is a unique community project.
Very, very carefully unscrew this bottom bottle here. That's a week's worth of insects right there. A lot of the bigger insects are already known, and there's just this whole hidden world under our feet that we just never recognize because these things are so tiny, we just dismiss it. So it's really just this incredible eye-opener once you realize how many insects are out there.
The Bioscan project wouldn't be possible without the devotion of volunteer citizen scientists.
We're in the middle of Los Angeles, yet you guys discovered a new species right here in your backyard.
Walter Renwick and his daughter Eleanor are among the 30 families taking part in this program, the kind of new Lord of the Flies, willing to make a long-term commitment to collecting bugs.
So for 3 years, you've got this thing out there.
Yes.
Were you intimidated at all?
In the beginning, but actually Eleanor and I were talking about this earlier, and we're halfway through. I think we have maybe just a little bit more of a year left. And Eleanor was really sad. She's like, oh no, I love that trap.
6-year-old Eleanor is growing up with the large science experiment in her backyard.
When I was little, when I was 5 years old, we found a sparkling beetle. And then we started to like them because they were all sparkly.
Although the new flies are the aim of this project, a plethora of other insects are also in the bug soup.
Wow.
Whether it's beetles, ants, or flies, the 30 volunteer families have actually created a buzz, discovering a total of 30 new species within the first 3 months of the experiment.
Megacillia renwicorum.
You say that very proudly. That is the fly that is named after you guys.
Yes, I don't have any sons to carry on the family name, so we have a fly.
At LA's Natural History Museum, the bug stops here. Scientists are constantly cataloging insects of every shape and size. This is where all the Bioscan samples are being saved. Only in LA's Natural History Museum is there anything like it in the world. Nothing is being lost on this research project.
What you have in your hands right now is just like a giant unsorted sample of Lepidoptera. So my job is to select and sort out all the leps so that their scales don't muddy up the sample that'll then go on to our entomologists in the museum.
Before working here, did you have any involvement with insects?
I didn't. I was actually really terrified of insects. But I've become really interested in the things that they do and their behavior and just how they look, because some of them look pretty crazy.
After visiting the Nerve Center of Bioscan, where USC students and volunteers work to sort out samples, I met one of the entomologists responsible for the new discoveries. You spent countless hours behind this scope looking at flies. Did you ever think it would have such a big impact on the LA community and around the world?
I hoped that people would pay attention to that and think that that was as remarkable as I thought it was, but in the beginning I had no idea. In the beginning I was just sitting down at a scope and I was looking through these samples, and I was frustrated that I didn't know what so many of them were.
Emily Hartop has gone through over 35,000 samples looking for new flies.
We're looking at the morphology. What we start with is just looking at a whole bunch of flies together and saying, well, this one looks different than this one, and this one looks different than this one. And then as you begin to refine that, you take notes on specific characters, you take measurements, you take photographs, and you get more specific from there.
Flies might be in focus for bioscanners, but the research potential for this collection is nothing to swat away.
Understanding biodiversity right here is tremendously important for this city.
Dean Penchef is Bioscan's project coordinator. He is leading the charge to keep hundreds of thousands of insect specimens organized.
It's the biodiversity here that fuels the ecosystem services like oxygen generation, waste management, things like that, that keep this city going. But we know full well there's much more to be had from these samples than we are going to take from them.
This is just the beginning of the research endeavor.
If we don't take an inventory right now and discover what's here right now, we'll never know if it's changing 50 years from now. So as issues like climate change, as these things keep rolling and changing things for the environment, we need to know how they're affecting everything, including our urban environments. Frustration and curiosity, we're definitely leading the way.
Now, I gotta say, seeing the child in the backyard, she was excited about bugs, about discovering new things. It really reminded me of what I was like at that age, and I just never stopped getting excited about bugs.
You know, you're always, gallivanting around the world, going to the Amazon, going to the Arctic. What was it like to be able to look at science that's happening right in your backyard?
Yeah, I mean, for me, normally when I do my science, it's 3 flights, 2 bus rides, 2 days of canoes, and then you get to your field site. This was just being in traffic on the 405 for about a half an hour. And so it was exciting just to know that, okay, I don't always want to be traveling afar to discover something and to be able to share with people where those discoveries take place. It's not always far away where we still are exploring. It's right in our backyards. There's still rocks to be turned back there.
But let's be honest, I mean, most of us, when encountering bugs in our backyard, don't exactly have a positive response. So what would you say to someone who is trying to kill all of those critters in their backyard?
I get that a lot, and people think that the norm is to kill, whereas I think the norm should be to just let an animal continue living like it was in the first place, just doing its own thing. I do think studies like this really help kind of bring awareness that what you're killing might be something new or interacts with something that we don't know about. So there are mysteries in your own backyard. These things are just living part of this ecosystem that we call Los Angeles. Be it in religion or in your own backyard. I think this episode's all about finding science in places you don't normally look for it. I think there's kind of a nice lesson in that. That's it for this episode. We'll see you next time, right here on TechKnow. Dive deep into these stories and go behind the scenes at aljazeera.com/techknow. Follow our expert contributors on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Google+, and more.